negativity surrounding each hire from my observations. There's always those couple people or segment of the fan base that's always going to spin the negatives over whoever they're bringing in to take that respective job. I didn't really see that yesterday when it came to Sean Elliott. Now, Sean Elliott's obviously somebody that has had a long history at South Carolina, going back to the Spurrier and eventually the Muschamp days. So it's a name that people are obviously very, very familiar with. And a guy that's just done a whole lot of different things in his time in college football, with being an offensive line coach here, was also the run game coordinator back when Marcus Lattimore was carrying the rock for South Carolina. Again, the head coach at Georgia State. Spent time with his alma mater, Appalachian State, when he graduated there. So he's done a lot of different things. And again, that in and of itself is an exciting part of this hire. You just have somebody with a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge in different facets of being a coach. I think a lot of people are just excited about his intensity. And if you don't know anything about Sean Elliott, then you probably know that he's an aggressive guy. And he's the type of guy, and I brought this up to, I forget who I brought it up to yesterday, but headbutting guys like Irk Russell used to do back in the day when he was the defensive coordinator at Georgia under Vince Dooley, and he just start the game and he's got blood pouring down from his forehead because he's been ramming his head into other guys' helmets and that kind of stuff. And Sean Elliott, maybe not quite to that degree, but is in that same kind of realm of just a super intense guy. And somebody that the players hopefully will like and can resonate with, and hopefully leads to a lot of success and a lot of good things for this offense. Because again, coaching tight ends, that's fine and dandy. He's got a good tight end room that he's going to be in charge of. But I think more people are kind of focused on the running game coordinator spot of this, because South Carolina, for the 3 years under Shane Beamer, has routinely been at the bottom of the SEC when it comes to rushing statistics on a year-in-year-out basis. That obviously led to Montario Hardesty, getting removed from his position a little over a month ago now, I guess, and then bringing in Marquell Blackwell, who has experience in the SEC as a running backs coach. And I talked about this with Wes yesterday because it's easy to maybe kind of get the two positions confused a little bit. The running backs coach is a little bit more for player development and, again, the individual, one-on-one sessions with players and the mechanics of their individual, attributes within the offense, while the running game coordinator is more schematically based. And he's not going to be somebody that's necessarily calling plays. He's certainly going to have an influence and input on what plays are being called from a rushing standpoint. But again, this is somebody that did it, in the past here at South Carolina. Steve Spurrier trusted him to do that, and they had success when Marcus Lattimore was obviously healthy, when it came to running the ball. And in a very similar situation, you look at what he's inheriting with Rocket Sanders alone. And now, again, Rocket Sanders is the name that people are very excited about. But, Oscar Attaway, Warren Howell, these guys have had a lot of production in their respective schools at North Texas and South Carolina State as well. So you've got some good talent in this running back room. And, again, headlined by Rocket Sanders, who he himself, similar to Marcus Lattimore, has dealt with injuries in his college career. But, man, when he's at 100% strength, we've seen he is legitimately the best running back in the SEC. And we certainly hope that that's going to be the case this fall as well. So an exciting hire. Really, when you kind of take the 10,000-foot view of what South Carolina has done as far as coaching hires in this offseason, I think they've all been very positive and all are things to be excited about. We obviously expected Shane Beamer to make defensive changes because that's where a lot of the struggle was last season, and save for the last month of the year when they or month of the season when they changed their scheme on defense a little bit to that 3-3-5 and steadily got better. And in fact, in the month of November, they were legitimately one of the best defenses in the SEC when you look at the numbers. So that saved the jobs seemingly of those guys on the defensive side of the ball, but a lot has shifted around on offense. And bring in James Coley, be your wide receivers coach and assistant head coach. Somebody that has been there and done that in a lot of different places as an OC and a position coach at multiple places around college football. So good insight there. You have obviously now Sean Elliott coming in as your tight ends coach after Justin Stepp has left, and what he brings from a knowledge standpoint, and just being able to have his fingerprints on different areas of the offense, not only the tight end room, but the running back room as well. And then, when you talk about the running game coordinator, you're also going to have a role in the offensive line as well, which is his, an area that he worked as the offensive line coach previously at South Carolina. And you look at Joe DeCamillis coming in as the special teams coordinator, which you hated to see Pete Limbo go because he was legitimately the best at what he did. And there was a lot of people around the country that would, echo that sentiment. But he goes off to be the head coach of Buffalo, and you bring in a guy with 30 years of experience as a special teams coordinator in the NFL. So, I think without having seen anything get played yet on the field for the fall upcoming, I think you would grade what Shane Beamer's been able to do from a coach hiring standpoint this offseason as a high grade, probably an A or a B plus, somewhere in that range. And again, you still have to go out there and prove it on the field and prove it with the production that you get out of your players. But there's plenty of reason for excitement from a coaching standpoint, not to mention what they've done from the transfer portal. I mentioned getting guys like Rocket Sanders and so on and so forth, that you have a lot of talent and a lot of new faces coming into this team in the fall, in addition to a lot of high caliber talent coming in as true freshmen recruits as well. So team's going to look a lot different in a lot of ways, from both guys on the field, guys on the sidelines, and probably some schematics too. So, hopefully that all proves to be positive for South Carolina, and this season can be what we hope for. It's not going to be easy, obviously, with the daunting schedule that they have. But hey, there's no easy schedules in the SEC, and hopefully this can be the year that they bounce back after taking a little bit of a step back last year and just missing out on going to a bowl game. So hopefully getting back to the postseason this year, and who knows what happens. Once you get past 6 wins. So excited for that, and again, excited to see what all these coaches do in their individual new roles here at South Carolina. It is opening day of baseball. First pitch coming up today at 4 o'clock between the Gamecocks and the Redhawks of Miami of Ohio. Earlier this week, we talked with Stuart Lake, who's going to be on the call this season for Gamecock baseball. We'll replay that conversation coming up next. Here's some of his insights onto this South Carolina baseball team that is coming up next. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on your Friday morning here on The Game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on what is opening day of baseball. Gamecocks and Redhawks of Miami of Ohio getting set for first pitch this afternoon at 4 o'clock. We'll have all the coverage for you here on the game all day long leading you up to it, and then pregame coverage starting at 3:45 right here on the game. Quick reminder, coming up on March the 1st, Clemson coming to town playing at Founders Park. You'll have an opportunity to win some tickets to that game. Stay tuned for more details on that a little bit later on. Earlier this week on the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs, myself, Wes Mitchell, and Chris Clark spoke to Stuart Lake, who is taking over the role that Tommy Moody has left behind in the radio booth calling Gamecock baseball games. And obviously Stuart Lake has a long history in the game of college baseball as well as a history here at South Carolina, both in the dugout and on the call as well. So we spoke to him a little bit, get his insight and sharing some of his thoughts on the upcoming Gamecock baseball season. We started off with asking him about what the level of expectation for this team should be in 2024.
Well, first of all, I appreciate you guys having me on. Listen to you guys a lot as we're riding around, getting around town. But you're a top 25 team this year. Last year, you kind of were able to sneak in, if you could say, without people knowing who you were until the great start. But this is a team, a lot of experienced guys on the offense. It's been fun. I've got over to see a bunch of scrimmages. I think this will probably be in Coach Kingston's, honestly, 7 years here, the most he'll be able to interchange guys. They have a ton of really quality left-handed hitters, which is crucial in the SEC to have with all the power righty pitchers. And then I think the big thing will be, let's figure out the pitching. I think Friday, once they tell us Eli Jones will probably be that guy rolling out, and you got Chris Veach, who I think is going to be one of the best closers in this league, to wrap them up. But I think it'll be interesting to just see how the pitching falls into place as the season goes on.
Hey, Coach, it's Wes. Again, appreciate you doing this, man. Big fan of your work. I guess along those same lines, maybe if there are fans listening who are starting to kind of turn the page to baseball season and maybe haven't been paying quite as much attention as they will be throughout the year, who are a few of those pitchers, in kind of that same conversation? Who are a few of those pitchers that you maybe have your eyes on that you're saying, hey, we're going to need this guy to maybe step into a bigger role. We're going to need this guy to be a big part of what they do. Are there a couple of guys you've maybe circled that you would put in that category?
Well, it's funny. I went over yesterday that all of our former players are kind of getting ready to leave now, and today was Christian Walker's last day. Justin Smoke came through yesterday, spoke to the team. So I kind of grabbed Matt Williams, and I've known Coach Williams since he was a kid because his dad was a high school coach in our state. And I said, hey, I need you to sit down and tell me about the pitching. And he laughed, and he goes, can we do it next week? And I said, well, we start this week. He goes, I know. I'm going to have a lot more answers for you next week. And I said, all right, fair enough. So I really think the biggest thing, as I'd mentioned, Eli Jones is a guy that I'm sure tomorrow in the press conference, Coach Kingston will kind of confirm that rotation that he's coming out. Tyler Eskew has really had a great preseason. And then you got the guys with Becker and Roman Kimball, guys that I know when they get in there, they've got quality stuff. We've already seen Becker over his career do that. Again, I think the real key is going to be Veach. I was fortunate enough to coach here when we had a guy named Scott Barber, and way back 2000s could close on a Friday night, and if you need him to, start on Sunday. I honestly think Veach is that same kind of guy. I would not be shocked to see him in some of these weekends, maybe a little bit more in the SEC play than early on, getting extended innings, and I'd never be surprised to see him run out there first because I think he's going to be the key in a lot of ways to me to anchor in that pitching staff.
Again, talking to Stuart Lake, one of the voices for Gamecock baseball this upcoming season. You mentioned Matt Williams coming in as a new pitching coach from Liberty, a guy that's been around the game of college baseball for a very long time. Now, at the end of the day, the players themselves have to go out there and execute on the mound, but what kind of things can he do to get this pitching staff back to where it was a couple seasons ago? Because last year, that was kind of an area of struggle that this team had, especially later on in the season.
Well, I think what you'll see as you get to know Coach Williams and you get to know him more, obviously, as the season gets going, just brings a very confident and calm demeanor to it. And I've watched him over the years. He was at one time a coach at Spartanburg Methodist, then went into pro ball, then he was at Liberty. So I've just really followed his pitchers. And what his pitchers do is they throw strikes. And that's been a big thing. And when Coach Kingston mentioned his name to me years ago, what do you know about him? That's the biggest compliment. And I consider myself more of an offensive guy than a pitching guy, but I said, Coach, his guys throw strikes, and they just allow you as a team to have quick innings. And that's kind of what he's always been about. Get on there, work quick, and get those strikes. You're going to see he does. He throws the breaking balls like you have to now because everybody seems to better hit velocity. So I do expect to see our guys with the changeup being a pitch, which plays right into Veach. But I know he'll be doing that. But I think you'll just see a calm demeanor out of him as you get to know him and watch him through the games.
Coach, let's talk hitting a little bit here. Obviously, this lineup, man, I think they're going to be able to mash top to bottom, but it obviously starts with Ethan Petry and Cole Messina. I had the opportunity to meet Petry before last season, and I was just like, man, that was just a very impressive dude. I had no idea at the time he was about to hit almost 423 bombs and be on every list in America as far as the various awards out there. But what can Ethan do for an encore? Is there still some upside to go here? I mean, he was just so impressive as a true freshman. Can he be even better than that, or do you think it'll kind of be similar to last year?
No, I think he can be better. And it was so funny. I was in the press box yesterday, and John Whittle was sitting beside me and Kent Riker, the SID, and I said, hey, isn't this game funny? And they looked at me, and Petry was walking up for his first at-bat, and they go, what are you talking about? I said, last year at this time, this guy we didn't even know who he was.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I remember being in the cages with Walker hitting and just hearing the ball come off his bat, and Coach Lee walked in, and I said, hey, who is that? He goes, that's Ethan Petry. He goes, man, I think he's going to help us down the road. And, here we go. He didn't start, the first two games last year. And that, hit 2 rockets, and by Sunday he was starting, and we all know the season. But I think we're just really kind of that tip of an iceberg of him as learning who he is. It's going to be a tough year for him in a sense that everybody now, the scouting report will start with him and Cole Messina. So when you face the Gamecocks, those are going to be the first 2 guys the pitchers hear about, where last year maybe wasn't. But I'm expecting another big year out of him. And I just think with Cole being either in front of him or behind him, wherever Coach Kingston ends up doing with their batting order, just yesterday, easy RBI in the first, little fly ball to left field. Next at bat, looks like he gets beat and he hits a home run to right field. So, I mean, it's just a special type swings he gets off.
Coach, Chris Clark here. Thanks again for joining us. So along those same lines, as you said, Ethan kind of came out of nowhere last year. Is there anybody, a guy or two that you can pinpoint from this roster that maybe he's not a household name right now, but you think by the time the season rolls around, Carolina fans midway through the season are going to be saying, hey, that's a guy who's a dude now? I mean, is there anybody that could, make that type of leap to you from what you've seen and heard?
Yeah, and I kind of look for that too. And the guy that jumps out to me is the freshman Bakes. And you keep hearing his name come up where they'll say maybe he'll DH or maybe he'll be in left field. He's kind of the backup catcher. I think Cole will probably catch 50 games out of 60 this year because he's such a difference maker to the pitching staff. But Bakes is a freshman, I think, out of Pennsylvania. I don't have my roster in front of me. But if you were telling me to do one pick to click, he's going to be my guy. Just a right-handed hitter that in the scrimmages I've seen doesn't really seem to get fooled. I've watched him hit a home run down the right field line. I've watched him hit one in the left center gap, and I've seen him pull them. So he's a guy that has showed that he can use the whole field. And I don't know if he will be that DH opening day. Again, Ethan wasn't either last year, but I think he's a guy that our fans and people that get out to games a lot are going to notice him as he gets involved.
You mentioned that left field position that Bakes is in the running for, and again, you have the opportunity to use him in a couple different spots. Who do you think has the inside track to be the initial starter out there, or is this a spot that could see a couple different guys over the first couple weeks of non-conference play before finally settling on someone, whether it be Bakes, Blake Jackson, or Kennedy Jones?
Well, Kennedy Jones is a guy I was fortunate enough over the last couple of years to get to do some SoCon baseball. I would go do their TV games. I got to do their conference championship or tournament last year. Kennedy Jones to me is a guy that he certainly looks the role, and I've seen him in quality at bats. So I know tomorrow Coach Kingston will probably give us a clear idea of the lineup, but to me, I'm thinking Kennedy Jones is going to get his opportunities in left field. I could see Blake sliding over in the center field. Watched him yesterday, led off in the scrimmage. Nice quality at bat the first time with a hit, then a 2-out bunt late in the scrimmage, which I loved because he can then steal second. And I just think at that top of the order, whatever they settle on could be really key to allowing, Petrie and Messina and Lee Croy will probably be right in there too to get some RBI opportunities.
Coach, what are your expectations for Will Tippett this year? I think a guy, I guess, is kind of stepping into the role at shortstop. That's obviously kind of a spotlight position, I feel like. Did some good things for South Carolina last year playing second base as a freshman and kind of, I thought, got better as the year went on. But kind of just had to go through the fires early on. Do you think he can take another big step forward this year?
I do. And honestly, I think defensively he will be what we're talking about, either a really good defensive team or maybe an average defensive team, because if he can step into that role at short, and I don't care where you would hit him, he can bat ninth and I would be happy. I think if he can solidify the middle of that infield, then you really have a chance to be something pretty good, because they're going to throw strikes. I've gone out there. This staff is not going to be a staff that you're going, holy cow, let's let them hit it. They're going to throw strikes, and once you get in the league play, the ball's going to get put in play. And I've been around this league a long time. The teams, when you go back and look, Gamecock teams or just any SEC teams, that shortstop, he's usually pretty special. And Will has a chance, and I'm excited for him because he's a guy that never complained whatever was happening last year, put me here, put me there. I just think this is his opportunity to grab that spot, and I hope he does and just be that guy that, is in there every day and we're not wondering who's there.
Coach, last one for you here. Got about 2 minutes. Unfortunately, this is going to be the first baseball season without our friend Tommy Moody. I know they're going to honor him before the game coming up on Friday. And you don't like to use the word replace, and there is no replacing Tommy Moody, but you have been the one that has been asked to fill the void that he is leaving behind in that radio booth. And you obviously have a special relationship with him, having worked with him over the years as well. What does it mean that you are the person that's going to get to, again, fill that role that he is unfortunately leaving behind?
A tremendous honor. And as I have said, and I appreciate you saying that, there's no replacement. I'm just the guy that's going to sit by Derek this season. And Tommy has affected so many of us. I know he did y'all at 107.5. He did all of us. Tommy started my first year of coaching here in 1999, being an analyst on the radio. So we had 20-plus years of a relationship and a friendship that the last few years were so special. And just to have that opportunity this year to hopefully share a lot of cool stories about Tommy and just let our fans know that he's going to be a part of this program moving forward as he's always been. So I'm tremendous honor this weekend, and I'm excited. Please get into the park early on Friday because we have some just really cool things we're going to do, and the family will be throwing out the first pitch. So I want our fans in there to let them know how much we love and miss Tommy.
Absolutely. And again, that game coming up on Friday, 4 o'clock right here on the game. Pre-game coverage starting at 3:45. We certainly appreciate it, Coach. Looking forward to hearing you on the call for this season, and hopefully will be another great season of Gamecock baseball.
Awesome. Thank y'all, and look forward to talking to y'all again in the future.
Again, that was our conversation earlier this week with Stuart Lake, who again will be on the call this season with Derek Scott, again taking the place of Tommy Moody, who again unfortunately we will not have going forward here for Gamecock baseball, and we are certainly going to miss him, but they are going to honor him for the game coming up today. So if you're going to go out to Founders Park, make sure you get there early so you can take in all those festivities. We'll get back in the baseball conversation as the morning rolls along, but a news nugget from college football that may have flown under the radar I want to hit on coming up next. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on this Friday morning here on the game. As always, I love telling you about my friends over at Canty Foundation Specialist. your home's foundation is probably not something you give a whole lot of thought to it. And, I won't say rightfully so, but it's not something that comes to the top of your mind, but it's something you definitely need to keep an eye on, especially if you are noticing that you're having some problems or some issues that could be serious, serious problems. Things like cracks in your exterior brick, cracks in walls or above windows and door frames, doors and windows that might be a little sticky, uneven or bouncy floors, or cracks over your garage door. If you have any of these problems or notice any of these issues at all, you need to check out our friends at Canty Foundation Specialist. Go online to cantycanfixit.com, and a Canty Foundation Specialist will come out to your home, give an observation, and help you resolve your foundation issues so you and your family can live comfortably. Again, cantycanfixit.com for our friends at Canty Foundation Specialist. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on your Friday morning, opening day Friday, by the way. We're going to have a special Gamecocks baseball opening day halftime show Coming up today from the Village Idiot on Whaley Street, going from noon until 3:45. We're going to take you right up into pregame coverage of today's game between the Gamecocks and the Redhawks of Miami of Ohio. I'll be out there. Terry Ford will be out there. I believe Jay Phillips is going to stop by for a while. I think David Cloninger is going to hang out as well. Going to be a very fun show. So if you have the opportunity to come hang out with us at Village Idiot Pizza between noon and 3:45, certainly come and do that. And of course, you can always enjoy some delicious pizza from our guy Brian Glenn over there at the Village Idiot. So looking forward to that. Coming up at the top of the hour, intern Joe from Gamecock Central going to hang out with me from 10 to 11. We'll talk plenty of baseball, get you set for the Gamecocks and the Redhawks. Again, coming up today at 4 o'clock out at Founders Park. With how crazy this week's been with news, not only locally but nationally as well, one thing I feel like that kind of flew under the radar that nobody's really talking about is this little nugget that was revealed by Texas Athletic Director Chris Del Conte about the future of scheduling in the SEC. So Del Conte was talking to InsideTexas.com earlier on this week about the future of the conference and what the scheduling ideas are. And he said, we have 8 games scheduled right now. We're working on going to a 9-game schedule, but we have a ways to go with that. I would say this year we have an 8-game schedule. The following year we have an 8-game schedule. Then we'll look at going into a 9-game conference schedule, which would be presumably in 2026. Now, this is something that we talked about a lot in the offseason. We knew that the SEC was going to stick with the 8-game conference schedule, which they've done historically, for the start of the new SEC in 2024, where you're welcoming in Texas and Oklahoma. Now, with that, you have abandoned divisions, so you do have the opportunity to mix up the schedule and the opportunity to see more teams where you're not tied to having an East to West anymore, where you have to say, okay, well, you got to see these same teams every single year. That's gone out the window. And technically speaking, with the 8-game conference schedule, there are no locked-in rivals. No protected rivalries necessarily for the time being. The prevailing thought in the offseason when this was announced was that, okay, you're going to have a small holdover period, what we thought was going to be 1 year, to where all the rivalries that you are assuming are going to be protected and locked in for 2025 and beyond, you would go ahead and play this year. And then, again, you play them with the locked-in model for years to come and not have to skip a beat with, the continuity of any of those rivalries. But the fact that you're potentially going to have an 8-game conference schedule in 2025 as well, it does make that pretty interesting. Now, the reason why you would stick with this is because another extra game in conference for all these teams means that ESPN, who is now the exclusive rights provider to all things SEC, is going to have to pony up the extra money for that extra conference game. And the SEC is certainly not going to give that game away for free by any means. So you're going to have to make sure that you are compensated correctly, with that extra conference game. And the thought being that once you get into actually the meat of SEC play this upcoming year, you'll be able to figure out that number value and what exactly that number should be to get that extra money from ESPN, who just paid a boatload of money for the new college football playoff deal starting in 2026. And again, they're no strangers to spending high dollar value when it comes to their college football product. And again, they'll eventually get to the point where they do pony up the funds for the extra SEC game. It just does seem like that's going to be at least another year before that ends up happening. And when it was not known yet whether the SEC would go to the 8 or 9 game model, there was a lot of speculation and even some what seemed like pretty sure reports on rivals and how your schedule would rotate and everything. And then the prevailing thought is the 3 and 6 model, with every team in the SEC having 3 permanent opponents, 3 locked-in rivals, and then rotating through all the other schools in the conference, both home and away, where you'd be able to see everybody over the course of a 4-year period. That way you're not running into the wacky scenarios that the SEC has had since its last expansion with Missouri and Texas A&M, where in the, almost 12 years those two teams have been in the conference, Texas A&M and Georgia have played once. Like, that kind of thing shouldn't happen. You should be able to see everybody on a pretty routine basis, where if you're a college athlete and you stay at one of these schools for 4 years, you should get to play every team at least twice, both home and away, over the course of those 4 years. And it seems like whenever they do go to that 9-game conference schedule, that model will, will come into effect where that kind of thing does, end up happening. And again, that gives us an extra week of SEC play, limits you to 3 non-conference games and all that good stuff. There are some caveats to this, which are certainly strong things to consider when you talk about the SEC and what its presence is in college football, where we expect multiple teams from the Southeastern Conference to be in the college football playoff. You expect, especially with this 12-team format starting in 2024. When you talk about going to a 9th game, you also open up the door for more of that cannibalization that we talk about when it comes to college football, and saying, okay, well, in an 8-game conference schedule, you theoretically could have, 4, 5 teams with 3 or less losses that we feel like having a 9-3 schedule in the SEC, you got a pretty good shot at making the college football playoff. Well, now you add an extra conference game to that, and suddenly you're going to have a lot more teams with 4 losses, 5 losses, whatever it may be, or that could certainly affect your ability to get more teams into the college football playoff. Now, again, you're still going to have your Georgias, your Alabamas, whoever it may be, that are either undefeated or maybe have only 1 conference loss, and they're surefire to get in, as right now the SEC conference champion is locked in regardless. But that is something to wonder about as we potentially get into a 9-game conference schedule in 2026 and beyond. That, okay, well, you might be sacrificing the opportunity to get maybe 1 or 2 extra teams in on the back end of the 12-team playoff with having that extra conference game, because again, they're going to kind of cannibalize themselves where you haven't had that extra week to do that in years past. So again, it's a minor thing, but something to certainly consider when we talk about what this is going to look like in the future. But I think we would all welcome the addition of an additional conference game. We talk about Cupcake Saturday that happens in November, where you're getting to the nitty gritty of the regular season, and 11 of the 14 teams are playing non-conference opponents and FCS schools and all that kind of stuff. That has been alleviated a little bit this year with the way that they're structuring the schedule, but you get rid of one non-conference game. That certainly would eradicate something like that, probably for the foreseeable future as well. So again, we're a ways off from getting this confirmed, but I do think it's interesting that Chris Del Conte, the Texas AD, to give us that little bit of insight onto how that is potentially going to look, in the next couple years. So you might have to deal with an 8-game schedule through at least the next 2 years, and then have that 9th game in 2026, which to me, and now that we're down to 4 power conferences, I would like a little bit more uniformity between the 4 conferences, because the Big 12 and the Big 10 already play 9 conference games. The Pac-12 is doing that as well before they had met their demise, and I would like to see the ACC and the SEC jump up to that 8-game conference schedule themselves, just to have, again, that continuity across the board with all 4 of the power conferences in college football. Come back and wrap up the hour. Again, we'll get into plenty of baseball conversation with intern Joe from Gamecock Central in the 10 o'clock hours. We get you set for the Gamecocks and the Red Hawks coming up today at 4 o'clock out at Founders Park. But I don't want to skip over this. A college basketball team encountered what might be one of my top fears last night. I'll tell you about that coming up. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on this opening day Friday morning here on The Game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on this opening day Friday morning. Again, coming up in the 10 o'clock hour. Intern Joe from Gamecock Central going to jump in here with me. We'll talk plenty of baseball. Also talk about some basketball as well, as it was very interesting last night for the women's team out there in Knoxville. Want to let you know, quick reminder, the Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union Grand Slam giveaway starts today. Go online to 1075thegame.com and register for your chance to win cash anytime the Gamecocks hit a grand slam this season. Very similar to our Lower Lisa Special Teams touchdown contest back in the fall. A pot of money grows with every single game. And when the Gamecocks hit a grand slam at some point this season, you know it's going to happen, right? You could win that money. Just go online to 1075thegame.com and, again, register for your chance to win the Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union Grand Slam giveaway. Dave, I want to bring you in on this. Do you have any, fears that are at the absolute top of your list of, I don't want this to happen to me?
Yeah, be stuck up real high somewhere with no one around and no way to get down.
Okay, so, you're talking, maybe, on top of a building, top of a mountain, something like that?
Yeah.
What about being stuck inside of an elevator? Does that scare you at all?
A little bit, because you could be there for hours and,
Yeah. That is,
it could fall, too. Yeah.
And look, we ride elevators every single day here in this building, and that is always a fear that's in the back of my mind. It's something that I've always been afraid will happen to me at some point, and knock on wood, I hope it doesn't. Well, the Fairleigh Dickinson basketball team last night lived that fear. They were on the road at Long Island University getting set to play their game, and a handful of their players got stuck on the elevator trying to get up to field level or court level, I guess, or whatever it was, to the point they had to delay the game because they were stuck in there for 10 minutes.
Yeah, wow.
Again, that has always been a big fear of mine. I try to avoid riding elevators at all costs, but inevitably sometimes you have to, especially when you have a building like this that's 20 stories tall. I'm always afraid that's going to happen. And especially for me, anytime I'm on an elevator, and the ones here in this building are very fast. I've never seen elevators go this fast to where you can go from 1 to 20 in 30 seconds. It's pretty crazy. But not every elevator operates at the same speed. When I'm on an elevator, I almost have this perception of time in my mind of how long it should take to get to the next level. And there's bumps and all that kind of stuff every time you're riding an elevator, but there's always that thing where it settles on a floor and then you're waiting for the doors to open. And if it doesn't open within 2 seconds, I get that mini little panic inside, oh no, it's finally happening. What am I going to do?
Yeah. Now, I did get stuck in an elevator at USC in the Russell House years
Okay.
ago.
How was that?
Well, it was just before a wedding. A friend of ours was getting married on the Horseshoe.
Okay.
We were in the wedding. So we decided, hey, let's go over to the Russell House for old time's sake.
Sure.
And someone had an old elevator over there.
Yeah.
And someone could pull the elevator door open and it would stop. And somebody had written graffiti on the walls there.
Okay.
So the guy I'm with going, hey, let's see if that stuff's still there. And he does it. By the way, it was still there. And then
so he opened it up while y'all are inside the elevator shaft.
Yeah, then it wouldn't go back. It just stopped and stayed.
Well, that's not smart.
Anyway, we missed the wedding.
You missed the whole wedding?
Yeah.
How long are you in there?
Quite a while, an hour and a half. We kept ringing the bell, and it was a weekend, too.
Oh, yes, there was really nobody there.
Yeah.
Oh, that's terrifying. Yeah, no thank you on that.
Yeah.
Are you still friends with that guy?
Yeah, actually. However, the bride, has not spoken to us since.
Well, you know what? I understand. I get it. Knock on wood. Hopefully I'm never in that kind of situation because that does terrify me. Good news. Fairleigh Dickinson did end up winning the game last night, 84-82. The game was delayed about 10 minutes, I guess, because that's how long those guys were stuck in the elevator. Then they had to give them the extra time to warm up and everything. But at the end of the day, it all ended up working out. But and look, I don't want to pretend to know the layout of Long Island University's basketball arena, but it may be a little bit old. And maybe that elevator hasn't been inspected by Otis. That's the elevator company, right? Maybe Otis hadn't inspected that one in a while.
Yeah, was that a guy named Otis Elevator?
I don't know. I've always wondered about that. There's the plant. It's somewhere up in near Florence, right? I feel like I've passed it before. I think, or maybe that's somewhere. Anyway, maybe it's in Georgia. I've passed it before. It's the Otis Elevator Place, where I guess that's where Otis lives. I don't know, but regardless, Fairleigh Dickinson ends up winning 84-82 over Long Island University after a couple of their players got stuck in an elevator last night. They had to get the fire department out there to pry the doors open and pull the guys out of there, but. Thankfully, it wasn't the hours and hours that you and your buddies were apparently stuck in the elevator over at Russell House.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know if that was an Otis elevator or not. It was really old because that building was built.
Now, have you ridden a Russell elevator since then?
No, go up the stairs every time now.
Well, there you go. You learn from experience,
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
And note to self, if you ever want to ride an elevator on someone else's wedding day, don't do it because you might end up missing the wedding.
Definitely not with my friend Jimmy.
And the bride will never speak to you again. How many years ago was that?
Wow. 1983.
That is a long time to hold a grudge.
Yeah.
That is fantastic. So hopefully nobody gets stuck on an elevator. I certainly don't want to ever have to encounter that kind of situation. 1 hour in the books. Coming up in the next hour, intern Joe from Gamecock Central, again, going to jump in here with me. We'll talk all things baseball, talk a little bit of basketball, too, as we've got plenty of things going on. Now that baseball's getting kicked off this weekend, I mean, every single weekend, you're going to have 3 games of baseball. You're going to have the women's team in action on Sundays, men's team in action on Saturdays. You're just going to have to, plop yourself in front of your TV or over at Colonial Life Arena or at Founders Park because there's going to be so much Gamecock sports action. And, of course, we're going to have plenty to talk about going into the weekends and coming out of it as well. So that's all coming up next, all right here on The Game. It's 10 o'clock. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point here on the game. Tyler Head now joined by intern Joe from Gamecock Central here in the Herndon Chevrolet Studios. Happy opening day as we're finally ready to get some Gamecock baseball underway this season.
Yeah, Tyler, happy opening day to you. I'm really excited to join you today. There we go. Oh, there we go. Yeah, happy opening day, Tyler.
It's okay. Everybody hits the wrong microphone thing to turn it on. It's okay.
Yeah, that's probably why I'm still an intern. That happens. So yeah, happy opening day, Tyler. Big weekend ahead of us.
Absolutely, a busy weekend ahead. You got 3 games of baseball. You got the men's team in action taking on LSU tomorrow. You got the women's team taking on Georgia. College game day is going to be in town for that. I said this at the end of the last hour. Once you get into baseball season, while basketball season still obviously has about roughly a month to go, hopefully even longer. When we're talking about the NCAA tournament, you have so much crossover and so many things happening at once. I don't envy the job that you guys do at Gamecock Central because you guys are going in a lot of different directions at this time of year.
Yeah, crossover season is one of the best and the worst times of the year. It's a lot of fun, and when all the teams are really good, it makes life a lot more fun too as well. Obviously, we know about the combined record between the men's and women's teams, both doing really well at this point, and then obviously there are a lot of hopes for this baseball team.
Absolutely. Before we get into our baseball conversation, our guy Josh upstairs has informed me we have some tickets to give away. I have a pair of tickets for Sunday's game. First pitch coming up at 1:30 out at Founders Park. Caller number 5 right now, 803-404-6100. Win yourself a pair of tickets for the season finale for this opening set against Miami of Ohio. Again, coming up Sunday at 1:30 over at Founders Park. Caller number 5 right now, 803-404-6100. Captain Dave will be there to take your call. So as we get set to start the season again, first pitch coming up today against Miami of Ohio at 4 o'clock, pregame coverage at 3:45 here on the game. First question is always going to be about expectations. Kingston's been asked about this. The players have been asked about this, of what the level of expectation for this team should be in 2024. And when you look at last season, there was a lot of pressure being placed on not only Mark Kingston, but this team because they had not lived up to the standards of South Carolina baseball in the past couple seasons where, Ray Tanner, when he was leading teams to national championships and putting them in the postseason every single year, they haven't had that same run of success since then. In fact, going into last season, they'd only made the postseason twice in Coach Kingston's tenure, only one time getting to the Super Regional, that being in his first year. So, you have a fan base that's like, hey, our level of expectation for what you're supposed to do is up here, and you've been right here. What are you going to do about it this season? Fortunately, they were able to finally host a regional properly outside of the one they did a couple years before with the weird Virginia thing with COVID. Made it to a Super Regional against Florida, again, a team you're very familiar with, coming up just short there. So you've gotten that bar of success. Well, now those expectations have got to be even higher this year. I imagine a lot of the fan base saying, okay, you took that step. Now we need you to get to Omaha this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the feeling around town is, baseball is back in Columbia, and the program is at a spot where, they can continue to compete to host super regionals, right? You're building off of last year's team. You're returning guys like Ethan Petrie, Gavin Casas, Cole Messina, your core of this team. So, the expectation certainly, is to host a super regional. I think that's just South Carolina baseball in general. You hope to have the guys in the right guys in the right spots to, go that far. And then you have enough, competition in the non-con to be ready for SEC play. So, their schedule isn't easy, Tyler. We all know that. But again, everyone kind of feels that this team certainly has enough to host one.
Well, there's no such thing as an easy schedule in the SEC at all when you're talking about, 8 teams that got ranked in the top 25 prior to the season, South Carolina being one of them. So you're going to experience a gauntlet of schedule. We saw South Carolina at points last year look like legitimately one of the best teams in the entire country, but they had their ebbs and flows, kind of faltered off a little bit towards the end of the season, and again, picked up momentum at the right time at the end of the year before jumping into the postseason. So, it's a long season, and look, baseball's a game of momentum, a game of highs and lows. So you're going to have some rough stretches. You're going to have some good stretches. You just hope, obviously, the good outweighs the bad when it's all said and done.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, this team is kind of flipped on its head from last year's team. Last year's team, you had a lot of young guns in the offense. You had a couple leaders in a Braylon Wimmer and Will McGillis, kind of veteran guys. And then, the superstars were kind of younger, coming onto the scene. Now it's reversed, right? You have these unproven pitchers, these guys on this pitching staff that, have the chance to prove themselves. And you look at the starting rotation, Eli Jones, Dylan Eskew, and Roman Kimball, all guys that have yet to really prove themselves as starters for South Carolina. So it is kind of the reverse of what you had last year, because last year you had 3 proven starters entering the season. So it is a little bit different. And so, I mean, we'll see with the weekend rotation. Obviously, Matthew Becker's banged up, and I'm sure we'll talk about that at some point as well. But yeah, I mean, this opening rotation needs to go out and improve themselves in weekend one.
And that was something that I felt like a lot of people were very confident going into last season, because in 2022, pitching was the high point of this team. Offenses struggled a little bit. You went out that previous offseason, you got Monty Lee from Clemson to shore up the offense, which they did a fantastic job of that. We'll get to some of that in a moment. But you almost kind of felt like pitching was going to be a given. Like, oh, we've got pitching, we're returning guys like Jack Mahoney, like Will Sanders, and we're going to be fine. And Will Sanders, your ace of staff, your Friday night starter, just had this roller coaster of a season where he had to sit out for a couple weeks, just kind of find himself really at the end of the day, which is not an ideal situation. And by season's end, Jack Mahoney was your only weekend starter that was still doing that same job, by the end of the year. So you had this rocky up and down season from a pitching standpoint. You had guys like Eli Jones that did emerge kind of at the back part of the season, which is good. But that was the big question coming in this offseason. It's like, okay, how can you shore up this rotation to be solid from that standpoint once again this season?
Yeah, absolutely. And, it helps that Roman Kimball is back, fully, recovered from Tommy John. And then obviously he's dealing with a little bit of a lat strain, similar to what Matthew Becker's dealing with. But Kimball's ready to go. Everyone, Kingston spoke to the media yesterday, and, he seemed pretty confident in his abilities. Kimball also seems confident in his own abilities to pitch on Sunday. And, you need a guy like that. Cole Messina in the press conference yesterday called him a maniac. So you need a guy like that to go out on Sunday.
And Roman Kimball, I've only been here since December of 2022, but even when I got here, before even seeing any Gamecock baseball from this perspective a season ago, I heard about Roman Kimball. Colin talked about him a bunch and what he could bring to this team. Obviously had, the TJ surgery, which, kept him out this past season, but, we know he's got that ability and that caliber to be a really solid starter, and even getting the nod. Now, again, that is kind of in part due to Matthew Becker not being able to go this weekend, but, getting asked to be one of your weekend starters, being in the Sunday guy coming up for this weekend is a big deal, and we're finally going to get to see him and reading everything through the scrimmage and all that kind of stuff. Everything sounds good, looks good, and hopefully he ends up being worth what everybody said about him.
Yeah, absolutely. There is a really, really high ceiling for Roman Kimball, and, everyone on the team likes him. Cole Messina is all in. So, he's the perfect guy for that Sunday spot, right? He's going to rally back and get it for you. He's emotional out on the mound, and that's what you need in a guy that's going to close out a series for you.
Sure. And again, he's somebody that has been hyped up for a while, and we kind of hopefully know what to expect with him. Dylan Eskew, who's expected to go tomorrow as a starter, is somebody that we saw a little bit last year, but we really don't know a ton about him. And again, through the offseason scrimmages and all that kind of stuff, has obviously earned the respect and the trust from this coaching staff to be tasked with being one of your weekend starters. But again, outside of Eli Jones, we still have question marks about what these guys are actually going to be in this rotation this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. Eli Jones is really the only one guy in the rotation this weekend that's proved himself consistently. He's worked the midweeks as a freshman, and, kind of built up to this moment. I think, if anybody on this staff deserves it, it's Eli Jones to go out there and start game one, opening day at Founders Park. Should be a pretty good one. And then obviously Dylan Eskew, we saw him out of the bullpen last year, wasn't the best of seasons, but he put together a really good fall and then a really good spring as well. He's earned the trust of these coaches, and, now it's Dylan's time, right? He has the chance to go out there and show everyone, what he's made of in the Garnet and Black.
And it's a new pitching coach as well, Matt Williams, coming in from Liberty. And I replayed this interview a little bit earlier. We talked to Stuart Lake earlier on this week on the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs, and I asked him, because he's very familiar with Matt Williams and the time that he's been around college baseball, what does he bring to this pitching staff? What can he do to help make these improvements? And he said, he put it simply, these guys just throw strikes. And at the end of the day, that's what you want your pitchers to do. And obviously you want them to get the ball past the guys and then not put it into play more often than not. But you're just kind of slowing things down, getting back to the basics, just throwing strikes, focusing on getting the ball over the plate and making these hitters guess and all that kind of stuff, which it seems like the most basic fundamental thing in the world. But again, when you had a rocky season like last year from a pitching standpoint, that's the kind of thing that you need to focus on.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially in the non-con, right? I talked with Jack Veltri on our show, Foul Balls, last night. Is one of my keys for the weekend and just the general non-con schedule is you got to keep guys off base, right? Because those mistakes add up. If you're giving free passes, it will add up quickly, and the momentum that you have built up in those games will dissipate pretty quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, it'll be interesting to see, and obviously we'll see what they do do from a bullpen standpoint, and that is a good thing about the way that the baseball schedule is structured, similarly to basketball as well, where you just go through your entire non-conference slate for the most part. You still have the midweek games once you get into conference play, but you have weeks and weeks and weeks of playing these, I don't want to say lesser opponents, because baseball's really one of those sports that the margin for the top talent and the bottom talent is pretty thin. So, you know, if Miami of Ohio took a game this weekend, I'm not going to sit here and say I'd be shocked by it. It could certainly happen. We saw non-conference teams come in and win games against South Carolina last season as well, but it gives you the opportunity to try a lot of different things. There's been so much turnover on this team, and we'll get into some of those specific names in just a minute, but, you know, in the today's world of college sports in general, with the transfer portal and everything like that, not to mention guys that you bring in as freshmen, having these non-conference, you know, series and midweek games and all that kind of stuff to kind of work out the kinks, work out the bugs, figure out what your team's going to be, because we're sitting here right now on opening day, and yes, we're previewing what we know from what we've seen last year and in years past, but we still don't know more than we do know at this point in time.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what you want the non-conference schedule to be. You want guys to, you know, get in and out of the lineup and find, you know, your best 9 for the SEC, right? That's all you can do in the non-conference. And obviously you want to win as many games as you can, but if you drop a couple, that, I mean, it happens. You want to pretty much go from coast to coast in the non-con though. But yeah, I mean, we're going to see some roster changes throughout the non-conference. I think Clemson will be, I guess, the first dose of what we will see the starting 9 to be,
right?
Or what it will look like for SEC play. But I think up until then, and maybe a little bit after then too, because you've got a little bit of non-con left before Ole Miss. But yeah, I think, you know, we'll see a lot of interchanging in the lineup.
Yeah, so obviously you start off with Miami of Ohio. You got Winthrop in the midweek next week. You'll have Queens. So you have back-to-back games in the midweek next week, actually. Queens, Belmont next weekend, then Gardner-Webb. Then you can jump right in that Clemson series right there at the beginning of March. You'll be at Founders Park on that Friday, Segra on Saturday, and then wrapping up at Clemson on the road on Sunday. So that will be, and again, Clemson's another top 25 team, very good one that we obviously had a good series against last year. And that's going to be your real litmus test right there in the middle of the non-conference play, as you said, before you get into the meat of the conference schedule, starting off with Ole Miss right there in the middle of March. So, again, it is good that you have that natural rival that you're going to see every single year to kind of give you that bar of where your team's at and what you need to figure out over those remaining couple of games of non-conference play before you get into what is what is the toughest conference in all of college baseball.
Yeah, it's crazy how similar it is to the basketball schedule, right? Clemson is really early on, you know, it's in your non-conference schedule, and then you go, you know, a couple weeks and you're right into SEC play. So, you know, it's weirdly set up like the basketball schedule, and, you know, you find out who your team is against Clemson, right? It's a rivalry series. You don't need any extra juice to get up for Clemson, right? Everyone should be active and ready to go, ready to win the series. So you really find out what kind of team you have going into SEC play after that Clemson series.
Absolutely. We'll have more conversation. We'll hear from Coach Kingston and some of the players coming up next as we continue to preview baseball as it is opening day out at Founders Park. Again, first pitch coming up at 4 o'clock against Miami of Ohio. Pregame coverage starting at 3:45 right here on The Game. I want to remind you, as always, you can listen to us on the 107.5 The Game app. Just go to your respective app store, Apple App Store, Google Play Store. Give us a download. Take us wherever you go, around the country, around the state, around the world. You can take the 107.5 The Game app with you, and you can also watch us on The Game TV, sponsored by Shepherd's Glass. Go to youtube.com and search The Game TV. Give us a subscription. Also hit that bell icon to stay notified anytime we do upload or do have a live stream as well. Again, more baseball conversation coming up with intern Joe hanging out here on the Extra Point on The Game.
Well, as you mentioned, last year our pitching dominated our hitters early on in the spring games, the inter-squad games, and so we weren't quite sure what to expect going into the season. And then opening night, we put up a lot of runs. So I think the inter-squads have been very competitive this spring. The hitters, I would say, were well ahead of the pitchers in the fall, but I would say this spring so far it's been fairly even in terms of good days, bad days for each. So I think the pleasant thing is to see that our pitchers have started to catch up to the hitters, and we're looking for good things out of both.
Welcome back in. It's the Extra Point. Tyler Head and intern Joe hanging out with you on your opening day, getting you set for Gamecock baseball coming up tonight, or this afternoon, excuse me, against Miami of Ohio. First pitch at 4 o'clock. Pregame coverage starting at 3:45. Reminder, also go online to 1075thegame.com and register for your chance to win the Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union Grand Slam giveaway, which does start today, very similar to our Lori Lisa Special Teams Touchdown Contest. There'll be a pot of money that grows every single game when the Gamecocks eventually hit a Grand Slam, and let's be honest, it's going to happen at some point this season. Ethan Petrie would probably be the one that hits it. When that does happen, you could be the lucky winner of whatever amount of money is in that pot. So again, go online to 1075thegame.com today and register for your chance to win the Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union Grand Slam giveaway. That was Coach Kingston yesterday in his media availability, talking about what he's learned from the scrimmages as well as from fall ball, which, he kind of mentioned there. And it's very similar to football, where there's usually in an offseason, like the defense may be ahead of the offense may be ahead of the defense, whatever it may be. But that's not always an indication of what's going to happen once you roll into the season, because, again, there's so much familiarity between guys in the old team, nuances, and knowing what guys are going to do. And then you finally get the opportunity to play against a new opponent, a team that you don't really know a whole lot about, a team that doesn't know a whole lot about you. And you could go out there and score 21 runs the last tonight, or, throw a no-hitter, and I don't think anybody would be surprised with either outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. That is the case with baseball, right? Obviously, the hitters are going to be ahead of the pitchers. Pitchers need a little bit to get in the groove of things, and, when the spring starts kicking up, they really start warming up their arms. So, this pitching staff, obviously, like I brought up at the top of the show, this hitting staff is really, really, veteran heavy, and then this pitching staff is a little bit younger and inexperienced. So, I would have thought the hitters would have been ahead of the pitching staff, but, like Kingston said, and I would agree with this, in the spring, the pitchers have certainly caught up, which, should give you a lot of hope going into this weekend, and especially because, Tyler, we talked about the rotation already. You've got guys that are ready to go out there and prove to the world that, that they can ball out in the Garnet and Black.
Absolutely. Like every other, team, you're going to hit the transfer portal pretty hard in the offseason, and South Carolina certainly did that. And you got a couple notable names that are coming in that are set to be immediate factors on this team. And listening to you guys talk about this yesterday on your foul ball show on Gamecock Central, the top of the lineup is probably going to be addressed pretty quickly when it comes to some of these guys out of the transfer portal, namely Blake Jackson and Parker Nolan. Parker Nolan obviously playing at Vanderbilt. I mean, you're looking at those two guys possibly being your top two in your lineup.
Yeah, absolutely. And yes, and we talk about it because those two guys, weren't, the flashiest of transfers coming in. And, we talk about the scrimmages and the body of work. Those two guys got here and they were consistent through the fall. They were consistently good throughout the spring. So they've certainly earned those spots at the top of the lineup. Blake Jackson, one of those guys who's got power, but can also, hit for contact and, swipe a couple bags too. South Carolina really hasn't had a true leadoff hitter in the last couple years at least. So Blake Jackson will probably be one of them. Jack and I talked about, that he will probably be, the number one guy leading off, and he's not shy of power. He's hit a couple home runs in the fall too. So, Blake Jackson is one of those dudes, man.
And obviously, we saw what Ethan Petrie and Cole Messina both did last season. Both those guys earning preseason All-American honors as they should have. For a guy like Ethan Petrie, who, again, nobody expected anything out of. When somebody comes in as a true freshman, they could be a superstar. They could be somebody that doesn't really even see the field all that much. You just never really know. And for him to take off the way that he did, and he had, a period of the time last season where he cooled off for a couple of weeks there, which is just natural. That's the flow of baseball. But, man, the expectations for him coming into the season are going to be absolutely sky high, and we hope to see him take an even bigger step forward in his second year here at South Carolina.
Yeah, absolutely. And the sky's the limit for Petrie. I mean, it's going to be hard to replicate what he did last year, but it's certainly not out of the question. And it is the expectation that he will, go above and beyond with what he did last year. Petrie's biggest, attribute last year was staying hot throughout the entire year, right?
Yep.
And that's going to be key for him to do it again this year. He was one of the most consistent bats in the lineup, and when Petrie's hitting well and hitting bombs, everyone else starts to pick up. So if he can stay consistently good throughout the year, I think this offense is going to be alive.
And again, we focus a little bit more on his offense, but defensively, he could be used in a couple different ways, particularly when we talk about Gavin Cassis and Tyler Cassie at first base. A little bit nicked up right now. Petrie could maybe even factor in playing a little bit of first base too.
Yeah, absolutely. Big body, certainly has the glove for it, playing out in the outfield. So, Petrie at first wasn't something I had on my South Carolina baseball bingo card at the beginning of the year, but, here we are talking about it because you're right, Causey and Casas both a little nicked up. So, and you want to give those guys as much time as they need. If they're not ready to go today, and obviously it's opening day,
sure,
college baseball players are going to want to go today, but, if they needed a little extra time, give them that time, right? Because you need them for, SEC play, Clemson, the rest of the non-con.
And somebody else that can be used in a variety of ways, a name I think we're going to get very familiar with very fast is Ryan Bakes. Coming in as a true freshman, he was kind of factored into being one of those guys potentially in the mix for that left field spot, though that does seem like it's going to go to Blake Jackson, but they're talking about him maybe being a DH, maybe even being a catcher as well. Like, this is a guy that comes in with the ability to do a lot of different things. I'll be very interested to see what Coach Kingston and staff end up slotting him in to do.
Yeah, Bakes is another guy that's, dominated throughout the scrimmages, right? Came in, and obviously they had high hopes for him in the fall, and then played really, really well in the fall, and then really, really well in the spring, right? So it is about the body of work. The first guys that we are going to see, out for South Carolina is because of their body of work in the fall and body of work in the spring. Now, obviously, as the spring progresses, we see some lineup changes. Other guys might be playing better than some of the other guys, but the guys that are getting the first crack at the starting lineup are the ones who put in the work in the offseason and have been able to play well and play well consistently throughout the fall and spring.
Absolutely. And then Will Tippett, somebody else that factored in a lot last season, sliding over from second base to that shortstop spot, which, again, very important part when you're talking about the defensive side of things. But he's shown the capability of you should be pretty sure at that spot with him.
Yeah, absolutely. They're really confident in Tippett's ability, right? They brought in Lee Ellis, a true freshman. He was competing with Tippett for the job, but, Tippett being the veteran was probably going to win that one out. They still have high hopes for Ellis, and Ellis still can make an impact on this team. As a true freshman, showed a lot of good stuff in the fall, was a little bit, slower to replicate it in the spring, but also another guy on the bench that could give you some work.
And obviously, with the start of baseball season, it's going to be the first one without our friend Tommy Moody on the call. Stuart Lake is going to be filling that spot for him in the Gamecocks radio booth. Coach Kingston, you actually asked him this question yesterday. Coach Kingston, spoke for just a moment on what Tommy meant to this program and what it's going to be like without him going forward. This will be cut number 7 here, Dave.
Yeah, Tommy's missed by all. One of the best to have ever done it. Nobody had more pride and love and passion for Gamecock baseball than Tommy did. He was a close friend of mine, close friend of many, and he's been sorely missed. And I think he'll be missed even more once we start playing games and we don't hear his voice and we don't hear his passion. And I don't go on the radio show with him so he can ask very detailed questions about how the weekend went. I'm going to miss all those things, but we are going to honor him as is deserved, and in a manner that I think will make him and his family proud. And the one thing I can say is I know he'll be watching over us, and when you see us get good breaks during the year, I think we can look up and say Tommy might have had a hand on that.
And obviously, he's meant so much to Gamecock baseball. I believe was on the call since 1999. So many people grew up listening to Tommy Moody, and who's such an integral part of what this program was. And obviously, we're all still shocked at his passing, untimely passing, going back to October of last year. And I think it's going to be very emotional out there at Founders Park today. They're going to honor him. His family's going to throw out the first pitch. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of tributes to him, not only today, but as the season goes along. But it's definitely going to be a weird not having Tommy Moody on the call for Gamecock baseball.
Yeah, definitely going to be, or not going to be any dry eyes in Founders Park this afternoon. It's going to be really hard for the Gamecock community to honor such a legend. And, Tommy Moody was larger than life. He narrated many a spring nights, studying, cooking, just as a student at USC, and then also getting to know him also in the media side of things. He was larger than life. And as soon as you heard his voice, you felt like you were at home.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I'm excited to hear Stuart Lake, and obviously he's somebody that has great history with South Carolina, great history with Tommy Moody as well. And we talked to him earlier on this week, and he doesn't like to use the word replace because there is no replacing Tommy Moody. He's simply filling that void that he unfortunately, has left behind. But again, he's always going to be a part of this program, as Coach Kingston mentioned, and I'm very excited to see what the tribute's going to look like today.
Yeah, absolutely. And, he certainly will be missed, and I'm assuming they will do something with the radio booth and stuff like that. I mean, he will never be forgotten and forever a piece in Gamecock legend.
Absolutely, and we'll talk plenty about that more, not only today, but as the season rolls along. Want to jump into some basketball conversation. Very interesting night last night on the hardwood for the women, and a big game coming up tomorrow for the men as well, taking on LSU. We'll jump into that. Intern Joan hanging out with me here on the Extra Point on the game on your opening day on this Friday.
Gamecocks can dribble out the clock. Gamecocks will come off the deck here on the road to knock off the Tennessee Lady Vols on their home court. A good rally here after a tough first half. Gamecocks will win it. They'll knock off the Tennessee Lady Vols 66-55 here in Knoxville for their 5th straight win against Tennessee and 8th in the last 9 meetings. Gamecocks still the only undefeated team in the country at 24-0. There's the horn.
Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you. Intern Joe hanging out with me on this opening day Friday. That was the call last night on the Gamecocks Radio Network. Brad Muller as the women defeated Tennessee 66-55 to remain undefeated and, again, still the only unbeaten team in the entire nation. But, oh, boy, it was not an easy task because this game was tied up at 48 going into the final quarter, and Tennessee gave them all they could handle. But as we've seen so many times this season, the experience and the skill of South Carolina taking over in that fourth quarter, going on that 9-1 run to start things out, and that was pretty much all she wrote from there. And again, 11-point victory. You can look at that, from just a box score perspective and say, oh, that's pretty routine. But South Carolina had to work for that one last night.
Yeah, work they did. Shout out to Camila Cardoso. She was able to get things done in the paint. It's good to have her back
Sure.
in full strength as well. She was doing her stuff with the Brazilian national team. So really good to have her back. You needed her on the road in a hostile environment like Rocky Top.
Yeah, absolutely. And she goes out there, gets a double-double, 18 points, 10 rebounds. Raven Johnson pulls down 15 rebounds herself. And then Ashton Watkins coming off the bench gets 14 points and 10 rebounds herself, getting her own double-double. And, again, that's kind of what we come to expect for this team, just the dominance when it comes to defending off the glass. And Tennessee was giving them the credit. They were staying step for step with them if they relied that game. Rickea Jackson, who's obviously, one of the best players in all of women's college basketball. Dawn Staley talked about her, being one of the high picks in the WNBA draft. Pulled down 7 rebounds herself, scored 19 points. So, again, Tennessee really gave them a run for their money. But I almost kind of feel like you never want to lose. Right? You want to stay undefeated. That's been kind of the goal of this team. The one thing they haven't done is gone undefeated and won the national championship. Came close last year, just coming up short after losing that game to Iowa. But like a game like last night, where you can come away from it saying, we won, but we didn't look good doing it, that is almost the perfect scenario for someone like Dawn Staley. As you get close to the end of the regular season, you don't really have any tough games coming up. You took care of LSU, took care of UConn, now took care of Tennessee, who you do have to see again in a couple weeks. This is your opportunity to say, hey, we're not invincible. We need to focus on this, and that to get better for the stretch run coming in the postseason.
Yeah, absolutely. We talk about it a lot. Is like a team this good, it's hard to take a lesson from big wins like this. So you kind of, and you're not going to lose. So it's hard because you take the narrow wins and treat that as a loss, right? And then you go from there. This team did not shoot the 3 ball very well. They made 2 threes all game, and just shooting the ball in general wasn't great. You were 50% from the free throw line was another stat that stood out to me. But yeah, this team needed something like this, kind of a tight win to kind of reset a little bit, and get their focus back in the right spot, because you can get it's very easy to get complacent when you're at the top. And, it's not traditional with Dawn Staley's teams that we've seen that, right? She keeps, her teams very grounded and stuff like that. But again, when you're this good, it's going to be hard to be taught lessons and be given a loss to really, really have to regroup.
And that 3-point shooting last night, it's always something interesting to look at with this team, because for so many years, that wasn't something that they had to have a part of their game because they were so dominant on defense and, could just get by with scoring whatever they were scoring. But you bring in somebody like Tina Pau that really elevated the status of the 3-point shooting for this team. That's resonated with a lot of other players on this roster as well. But a game like last night is an example of, okay, this one element of the team, which again, if you live by the 3, die by the 3, we've seen that with Iowa, with as great as they are at shooting the 3, and Caitlin Clark setting all the records that she set, including the NCAA scoring record last night. If you run into a night where you're just not hot from beyond the arc, you can run into trouble if you don't have other means of scoring. This team with South Carolina is great at shooting the 3 more often than not, but they also have that ability to just be dominant down in the paint because of their physicality and because of their size. And we saw that on display last night because you had to resort to winning the game that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And we know Dawn's teams are guard heavy, but, when the guards aren't quite doing it for you, you kind of have to rely on the post when you have somebody as dynamic as Camila Cardoso. and also Ashlyn Watkins, Sanaya Fagan, your forwards, really, really come in clutch for you in games like these, because when you're not hitting the shots, you're not winning the game from the front or from the front court or from the back court. You really need to rely on those bigs to really get the job done down low.
We'll hit one more from Dawn Staley here. This will be cut number 25 here, Dave. She even said she felt like at points last night they were probably going to lose that game.
I mean, I had a feeling, like I really did have a feeling. I thought we were going to lose this game. I didn't want to lose the game, but I had that feeling of the last time we were here and we lost. Like the shoot around was kind of sluggish. And I think that's just the tradition of playing here. They've won a lot of games here. They've won a lot of national championships. And part of we know that the spirit of Pat Summitt is always going to be lingering around here. So we don't like to play against that.
And again, sometimes you can run into off nights, and again, you go to a place like Tennessee that, regardless of how good or how bad they are, that women's basketball is obviously a very big deal out there. So you're going to have a good crowd and a good environment. You certainly had that on display last night. But I think that's the mark of a good team, where you can go out there and not play your best game, not have the right vibes around your team, and still find a way to win, ultimately by 11 points.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're seeing the case of the better team is winning. There's so much talent on this roster, Tyler. It's ridiculous. And so, we're seeing that. And like I said earlier, you have to find a way to be able to reset and be humbled in wins, right? They won by 11 points, but they're not acting like they won that game by 11 points, right?
Sure.
They have to treat this like a loss if they want to get any better.
Right.
Because if you're acting like this is an 11-point win, you're going to get complacent, and then, you're going to run out, and then you're going to continue to have games like this, right? If you can flush this and move on and realize that you need to be better, because you are better. This team is a lot better than that performance.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And again, you're going to face this Tennessee team again to close out the regular season. Other than that, you have your pretty routine challenges over the next couple weeks. So again, we expect this team to, and look, even the projections for the women's tournament came out last night, and no surprise, South Carolina's at the top. You're the only undefeated team, and even losing to a team like Tennessee last night wouldn't have derailed that by any means. But again, hopefully this is an opportunity for them to assess what they did last night. Certainly need to clean up turnovers. Turnovers were a big factor in that first half, reason that they were down at halftime. 8 turnovers in the first half, only 4 in the second half. So that's one area this team definitely needs to address before jumping into playing Georgia this upcoming weekend with, again, College Game Day coming to town. Yeah, absolutely. And it's huge that Game Day can get here. And, I think it's good for the sport, good for the university. And like you mentioned, should be a very big weekend. It's opening weekend over at Founders Park. You're hosting Game Day for the women's basketball team. And I think it was good to get this lesson over with, on the road in the midweek, because then now when all the eyes are on you, you know exactly what you need to do. Absolutely. So they'll close out with Georgia at home this weekend, take on Alabama in the midweek next week. Then you have on the road at Kentucky, on the road at Arkansas, before seeing Tennessee at home to close out the regular season on March the 3rd. Then again, you have the SEC tournament, where, again, South Carolina should be able to hopefully run through that and continue their undefeated streak before ultimately jumping into the NCAA tournament, where, again, as we saw, there's no guarantees there, and you can always run into an Iowa or a team like that, which, is always going to be tough, but, still have all the goals in front of you of remaining undefeated and hopefully pursuing another national championship. Yeah, absolutely. And, anything can happen in this February and March kind of window. NC State knocked off Notre Dame at home, so that was a big one. So in South Carolina, survived. Iowa, played Michigan tight for a little bit there. It's becoming the Ides of March, Tyler. We're right there. Absolutely. Men's team also in action. We'll talk about them coming up next. Quick reminder, though, as we jump into baseball season starting today, Carolina and Clemson coming up on March 1st at Founders Park. You'll have an opportunity to win tickets to see that game. Stay tuned for more details right here on The Game. We'll come up back and wrap up the hour here on the Extra Point. Talk a little bit of men's basketball as they get set to take on LSU coming up tomorrow. That's next here on the Extra Point on The Game. Welcome back in. Extra Point, Tyler Head, intern Joe, along with you. A couple more minutes here before we jump into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs on this opening day. Speaking of opening day, have a special Gamecocks baseball opening day halftime show coming up live from the Village Idiot on Whaley Street today from noon until 3:45. We're going to lead you right into pregame coverage of Gamecocks and the Redhawks coming up today. First pitch at Founders Park at 4 o'clock. And again, as we get into this weekend, it is the most chaotic time of year when it comes to college sports. You got baseball, you got men's basketball, you got women's basketball, all happening all pretty much at the same time. And the men's team gets back in action tomorrow afternoon, taking on LSU at Colonial Life Arena at 3:30. Pregame coverage will be starting here on the game at 3 o'clock. Obviously, tough loss on the road the other night to Auburn, 101-61, and it can be tough to rebound from a game like that. Coach Paris last night in Carolina Calls talking about what this team needed to work on after losing that game.
Basketball stuff. We tried to pick up our ball pressure, our individual one-on-one defensive ball pressure. There've been a couple things. I think that there's been a little slippage there. So we really worked hard on that today. We'll do the same thing again tomorrow, and a couple of our ball screen coverages and doing that kind of thing. But just getting back to our basics, getting back to us. We talk about that all the time. That the opponents change because of that. You tweak some things, but the vast majority of our success is based on are we able to do the things consistently that we like to do. And so just refocusing on that and coming out and being aggressive and being in attack mode on Saturday.
Getting back to your basics, I think, is the biggest takeaway from that because, yes, the loss the other night was tough to swallow. 40-point loss to anybody is obviously going to be something that you hate to have, but all the goals are still in front of this team. And we'll get our updated bracketology. They're still in the mix for being a 5 seed and all that kind of stuff. You're still sitting good with all your net rankings and everything like that. You still have a shot to win the SEC here in the next couple weeks. So, nothing has been derailed from that game the other night. You got to refocus, got to lock back in. You don't want to let Auburn beat you twice by, LSU coming in here. Who's a bad team? On paper, South Carolina should have no problem with this matchup. You don't want to trip up on what should be not an easy win, but a routine win tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. Tough one out on the plains, but thank God you don't have to go out there again, right? Your 2 toughest road tests are over with, and then obviously you really overperformed in your one against Tennessee. But yeah, you got to flush this one. We know this team is capable of it because you had a similar situation out at Alabama, earlier in the season. So it is one of those things where, they'll flush it, and we've seen this team do this before. You've got a home game right afterwards to kind of rebound from it, and, you're still in contention for the top of the SEC. It's not over yet.
I'll say one takeaway from the other night against Auburn is Meechie Johnson getting 22 points and grabbing 7 rebounds, 2 of 3 from beyond the arc came to 3-point shooting. And he's been somebody that's been up and down a lot this season, which, again, that's kind of Meechie. He's a little bit streaky here and there, but as of late, he's been a little bit more down than up when it comes to the offensive side of things. So I'm hoping that 22-point performance the other night can springboard him to another couple of good games as we close out the regular season here.
Yeah, Meechie's such a big part of your offense. And, one thing Mike and I like to talk about as well is Meechie's defense. It helps get him going on the offensive end a little bit more. And we saw, in that game against Auburn, it was a little hard to get any defense going, right? They struggled on the defensive end and just stopping Auburn on the fast break and just in general on the defensive end. But one thing that I feel that doesn't get enough talk is Meechie's defense, right? And just in general, it's improved from last year, and this team is really, harnessed into their defense and has really used that to get them going on the offensive end.
And that's something for even the games where he's not scoring a lot of points, 0 points, 5 points, 6 points, whatever it may be. You look at his defensive numbers from a rebounding standpoint, they're usually actually pretty good, and even having some steals in there as well. So, even though he's not having the same factor on the offensive side that you would like to see out of him on a night-in-out basis, he's finding a way to still contribute on the other end of the court.
Yeah, absolutely. The SEC is a guard-heavy league, right? And so you need your 2 guards to be both offensive and defensive. We know how good Talon Cooper is defensively. So, and we've also seen his offensive production. And then you have Meechie on the other side, a little bit more offensive focus, but still really, really good on the defensive end. And, these guys are using their defense to get each other going, get themselves going on the offensive end.
Do you think Coach Paris had to burn the quarter zip that he wore the other night? You think that one's not going to make any more appearances?
That's a good question. I don't think it'll make any more appearances. No, I think you wash that one. Make sure you leave it in the top drawer.
How many do you think he has in his closet?
Oh, I don't know, Tyler. The amount of stuff that Under Armour has come out with for these teams and stuff, I'm sure it's probably over 10, 15.
Yeah, it's so funny. And it wasn't intentional. And he's talked about it like, with COVID and stuff, and coaches could be a little more relaxed with what they're wearing. He just naturally kind of started wearing quarter zips and did that when he came here. And we've just, as a fan base, latched onto that as that becoming his thing. And I'm really glad that he's leaned into it, embracing a little bit, kind of showing that more personal side of him, with kind of embracing that side. And the fan base loves it. Obviously, I mentioned quarter zip sales are through the roof these days with how good this team has been doing this year. But it is kind of fun to see a coach like that kind of getting in on those kind of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Every good team, when it comes down to the wire in February and March, needs something fun about it, right? You've got the horse, you've got the quarter zips. There is culture about this team, and that should excite the fans too, because there's a draw now for South Carolina. There's culture. These guys are feeding off each other, and the vibes are just really good.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just makes it fun overall, which has been a great season. Again, the loss the other night, you're still 21-4, 9-3 in conference play. You still have all your goals ahead of you. This team's going to be in the NCAA tournament, barring just a complete collapse in these next couple weeks. So plenty of things to get excited about with men's basketball. And again, back in action tomorrow, taking on LSU at 3:30. Got about a minute here, wrapping up. Appreciate, as always, you jumping in here with me. We'll hear plenty more from you as the spring rolls along. You'll be our baseball insider for the Extra Point. Hopefully it's a fun and exciting baseball season. But tell the folks a little bit about what you guys got going on over at Gamecock Central.
Yeah, absolutely. Tyler, appreciate you having me on as always. But yeah, check Jack Veltri and I out on this week's episode of Foul Balls, aired live on YouTube last night. And then obviously my show, The Walkthrough with intern Joe.
Which you're rocking a nice hoodie for the people watching on the live stream.
Yeah, I'm still working on getting the merch outside of friends and family. I'm still working on that. It's a little bit out of the intern's capabilities right now, but we're working on getting merch for everyone. But yeah, tune into The Walkthrough, usually Sunday nights at 7 p.m. on YouTube.
Very cool. Well, again, appreciate you hanging out with me. Again, we'll probably talk to you about the same time next week as well.
Can't wait.
Very cool. That's intern Joe. I'm Tyler Head. This has been The Extra Point. Coming up next, it is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Weston Chris will jump here with me. We'll jump back into conversation about Sean Elliott. May even hear from one of his former players as well as talk some baseball on opening day too. That's all coming up right here on The Game.